Last year, Daniel Mayo was here, and that was your first SharkCon you spoke at, and it just blew me away, and so we're lucky enough to have him back. He's a systems builder and AI enthusiast with a passion for creating and optimizing both technological and personal development systems, with a background in modeling and simulation engineering. Daniel brings a unique perspective to the application of objectivist philosophy in everyday life. Daniel has been a student of objectivism since 2013 and is constantly seeking ways to integrate philosophical principles with practical, systematic approaches to personal growth and decision making. When he's not developing new systems or exploring new frontiers of AI, you might find him on the ultimate frisbee field or delving into the world of nano-cap stock investing. Daniel is excited to return to SharkCon, building on his well-received presentation from last year's event. Let's welcome Daniel.
Thanks, Cynthia. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone in the back, hear me good?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so I want to start with an opening exercise. I want everyone here to just look around this room, and I want you to identify at least two things in this room that you like or dislike. It can be anything. It could be anything, anyone, and I want you to consider why you feel this way. And if you have pen and paper, it'd be good to write this down in terms of what it is, at least two things you like or dislike that's in this room that you see, and why you feel that way about those things. And the only rule is it can't be yourself, because that's too easy for us to judge this. All right, and also don't overthink it. Just whatever comes up, that's what I want you to put down. Just whatever strikes you as something you like or dislike in here. So just take about 30 seconds or so to do that. If you don't have pen and paper, just do it in your head. It's no big deal. And if the mic stops working, just people in the back let me know, like raise your hand or something if you can't hear me. So I'll speak up. Okay, that's no big deal. All right, so this exercise is actually related to something that Ayn Rand said, which is, in every aspect of life, a man should have favorites. He should define what he likes most and why. There we go. And then proceed to get it. So I want you to imagine two versions of yourself for a minute. One version of yourself doesn't really know what they want in life. You know that as an objectivist, you want happiness. That's your purpose. You know that life is the standard, and you want to seek it. You want to achieve it, but you don't know how to get there. You don't know what you want. You don't know what kind of career you want. Let's say you, with a romantic partner, you jump into a relationship with one because you feel the desire for them, and you come later to regret it because you realize, oh, they're an objectivist, but there's incompatibility there, which you come to realize. So in some sense, you have some regret from that decision that you made. So the issue is you don't know what you want, you know you want to be happy, you know you want to be productive with a career, you know that's a virtue, but you don't know which career would really fire you up. So that's one version of yourself you can imagine. Another version of yourself would be like Howard Rourke, who he knows what he wants, right? Like he knows, like when he saw Dominique, he's like, I want that. He knew what he wanted. He knew why he wanted it. As far as being an architect, he knew exactly why he wanted it, and because he knew what he wanted and why, he was able to take massive action to achieve the things that he wanted. So I want to ask you, do you take pride in objectively knowing your favorites and why? So when I was thinking about the topic for this talk, my answer to this question was, I can always do better. Always do better at this. Because this is a skill. What Howard Rourke has, what he has in terms of knowing what he wants and why, that's a skill that he built up. It's not just something given. And so for me, the motivation for this talk is I can be better at this skill. But in order to be better at this skill of knowing favorites and why, I want to figure out, okay, what's the process? What's the process for developing this skill? So the difference between those two versions of yourself that we mentioned, between Howard Rourke and the other one that doesn't know what they want, even though they wish they knew what they want, the difference is this skill of ranking, which is you know what you want, but you want it over other things. So there's always other things. Howard Rourke, he wanted to be an architect, but he knew he wanted it over other careers. So there's always that alternative. And that exercise we did at the beginning, that is the basic kind of ranking. Choosing something based on liking or disliking is one of the most basic kinds of ranking. And if you want to develop this skill, or to develop this skill like Howard Rourke did, is essential for happiness. Developing a skill of objective ranking, which is not only knowing what you want, but why you want it. It's crucial for happiness. And so just for a moment, I want to talk about, okay, what are the differences, what are these key differences between these two types of versions of yourself in terms of that ranking, that skill of ranking? So the first person that didn't know what they wanted, where you didn't know what you want, you were still ranking, but it was non-objective. Because you still pursued things, you had values, you pursued them, but you sometimes experience regret, like you got a relationship with someone kind of out of a certain desire for them because they shared a philosophical view with you, but you come to find out you regret making a decision because there were other factors that you didn't count for. Other things that can result from non-objective ranking: dissatisfaction, missed opportunities, procrastination, and indecision. On the other side, you have objective ranking, which we're going to go into all about what that means. Can leads to contentment, satisfaction, seized opportunities, proactivity, and decisiveness. So hopefully I've motivated you about why this skill is important for happiness and why you should focus on building it. If you want to value intensely, not just have value intensely because you know why they're important to you. So first, the roadmap for this talk, there's just two main points. What exactly do we mean by ranking? Because when I say ranking, I'm sure you have an idea of what that means. It's not some new concept as far as how people use it, but we're going to really dig into what it actually means in this context. And then we're going to talk about, okay, how do we actually rank objectively? What is the process for doing so? Okay, so first off, what do we mean by ranking here? So I'm going to use a personal example, and it's going to be a very simple example. So I did this exercise that y'all did at the beginning. I did this for myself a little while ago, and I did it at my desk at my apartment. And one of the things that I identified that I like is just in my perceptual awareness, like something I perceive with my coffee mug. So it's very simple, right? It's a starting point. I knew I liked this coffee mug. But one thing I was thinking about is, compared to what? So I realized there was other mugs that I had, or other cups that I used that I didn't like, and I knew I liked this one over that one. So when you do basic rankings, you have three main components. You have something you select, you have alternatives that you're selecting over, and then you are selecting based on some standard. Now, if I were to say, I like this coffee mug over, say, a teacup or other coffee mugs that I've seen, because I just like it. It's my standard in that instance would be my feelings, right? I like it better because I just feel it. I don't know why, but that's what I feel. I feel a desire for this coffee mug. So if you define basic ranking here, to use a somewhat technical term or technical definition, an ego selects among alternatives according to a standard. So to put this in just the normal English, I select this coffee mug over, say, some teacup, this teacup that I have, because I like it more. So you got the selection, the coffee mug, the alternatives, which is the teacup, and then the standard, which is basically my feelings, I like it more. So that's basic ranking. That's that first version of yourself that we mentioned. That's one type of ranking that they would use. But what's the difference here between basic ranking and objective ranking? So basic ranking, the standard is based on, like I said, unexplained feelings. I don't know why, I feel like I like this thing, this coffee mug. And there's still alternatives. So if there's, even with the basic ranking, it's essential to think about alternatives. I like this coffee mug over alternative cups or drinks, or whatever it is you're selecting. So in contrast, we got objective ranking, where standards are based on conceptualized cause of feelings. So you still have feelings for whatever the thing is, but you can explain the cause of those feelings. And also non-contradiction. The standards need to be non-contradictory, which I think is, I need to explain why that's essential. Law of identity, you can't have contradictions. Feelings can be contradictory, so if you can't explain it, then you have issues there. Also, explicit context. Notice when I first said I like this coffee mug over the whatever, I didn't specify the context, because that can affect how I select, or what I select in terms of the ranking. Also, is not explicit in the basic ranking is end goal. Okay, I'm choosing this coffee mug over other mugs, other cups, but for what purpose? Because that's certainly going to dictate which one I choose, what my standards should be, etc. So with that, we're going to define objective ranking, so not just basic ranking. Right, so use a slightly more technical definition. Acknowledging the context, an ego selects among alternatives a means to an end according to conceptualized non-contradictory standards. And I forgot to say before, but I'm the ego in this example. So, yeah. So to take the coffee mug example, apply it to this definition in somewhat verbose English, but still English. In the context of me drinking coffee at home, I selected this coffee mug over this teacup or other coffee mugs to achieve the end of having an enjoyable coffee experience, judging by the standards of ergonomics and low maintenance. So instead of saying I just feel like I like this, I can explain why. I like this, I like the handles. I can fit my whole hand in it as opposed to say some teacup where it's like just one finger and it's like that's not satisfying, right? And I like that. I can just put this in the dishwasher. I don't have to hand wash anything special like with a teacup, whatever. And so there's two standards I have there: ergonomics and low maintenance. So I can explain why I like this. So those are my standards. And of course, the end here, I want to have a good coffee drinking experience. And then with context, I said at home, right? Because this would not be really good in the car. Like that would be not too convenient, right? So context is important. Okay, so that's objective ranking defined. All right, so now we're going to talk about, okay, what is the process here? I gave an example, but like, what is the in-depth process for doing this ranking objectively? Okay, so the way I'm going to approach this is today we're gonna focus on a very simple example because this is a very complex process. But what I want you to do is think of it like this. It's going to be a very simple example, but it applies to any values, any things you're trying to rank. So, romance, potential romantic partners, careers, potential versions of yourself. They all apply to these things. So whatever, cars, anything, any kind of relationship. And we're starting with the simple, ranking simple alternatives. In this case, physical objects, because it's for this talk, it's simple to explain it. Easy to follow, at least the easiest to follow. The thing is, this is building a foundation for this skill we're talking about, objective ranking. We're building the groundwork to be able to rank even more complex alternatives. So not just coffee mugs, but things like personal relationships with people. Because relationships with people are much more complex than with coffee mugs and physical objects, but potentially higher payoff, right? Like more contributed to your happiness. And then, so that's acquaintances I have here, so it's simple personal relationships, but that's gonna build a foundation for what I call the jackpot, which is you being able to objectively rank the most complex alternatives. So you become like Howard Work, you can objectively rank potential careers, potential romantic partners, potential versions of yourself, future versions of yourself, and which would be the highest payoff for your happiness. So that's what we're building up to. Like I said, today is a simple example, and I want to talk about the three main parts to this process. And so I have them listed here. We're going to go into these now. All right, so the first part of this process, objective ranking, is forming generalized ranking. And with that is three parts, which we're going to go into. All right. So the way I approach this, I'm going to use a personal example for this demo. And it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be very simple, but what I want you to do is, I want you to follow along with me with your example that you gave in terms of the opening exercise, the things that you like or dislike and why. And see if you can follow along this process with me. And keep in mind, I'm using very simple examples, but it's going to apply to the bigger stuff as well. So keep that in mind. Focus on the process, not too much on the concretes, although the concretes are obviously needed. All right, so that being said, the first step is, so my personal example of the exercise, like I said, I was at my desk at home, and I was just looking around, and I noticed a few things that stood out to me as things I like. So like I said, coffee mug was one thing, which you can see here. Another thing is this Evian water bottle that I like. And behind here you can see my MacBook Air is another thing that stood out to me that I like. So this is the first step, just like the exercise showed. Just in your perceptual awareness, what are things that stand out to you that you either like or dislike? So we're collecting data here, just data collection for these. Okay, the next step is you look for patterns among those likes or dislikes, which I'm calling here emotional generalization, which I'm going to talk about what that means. So we identified the things. Now it's the question of asking why is it that I like these things or dislike these things. So for me, that consisted of comparing two alternatives. So for instance, for the water bottle, one of the things I have it here actually. Of course, I like it, so why not? So one thing I noticed was I like the lid. I really like the lid. I know this might sound weird to some people, but I just like that the lid it works, right? No issue. Whereas with this other bottle, a Great Value Walmart brand bottle, if anyone's messed with those, you know that the screw is it never freaking works. Yeah, and which I don't like. So I had a contrast here, right? I was ranking the Evian bottle over the Great Value bottle. One reason because the lid just worked, right? So that's for reliability. It works. Also, I like the water. It tastes water. Water tastes good, obviously. The size of the bottle I like. It's big. Fits my hand really well. I suppose the little bottle, which I run out of water quickly. And coffee mug, already explained that, right? Why I like that. And then I have my MacBook Air, which I compare to my Lenovo ThinkPad I have, which is a Windows machine. And I'm actually a first-time Mac user, never going back. And the reasons why I like the MacBook Air is because it works, it just works. No freezing, as opposed to the ThinkPad, the Windows machine. It's nice and light, nice and portable. I'm using it right now, and the battery life's amazing. As opposed to the ThinkPad, it would die as soon as I took it off the plug. It seemed like. So I have my reasons. I have my reasons for why I like these things, and I'm comparing to something else. So the next part of this step is, okay, we take those three things, we take those things that we ranked. So the water bottle, which I'm ranking water one over the other, one mug over another, one laptop over another. And what you do then is what I call emotional generalization, which is you ask yourself, what is it about these rankings? What is it that they have in common? What can I generalize from this? And so when I thought about it, I formed this new kind of ranking, this more generalized ranking, which is following our template from before. In the context of daily tool use, I select reliable, easy-to-use tools over maximum performance tools to achieve daily tasks. Because if you think about it, these are all, in some way, daily tools, daily use tools. I use them every day. And this explains my preference for easy to use, reliable. It just works, and it's either wide or it fits good in my hand. Those standards explain all of these. This whole abstract standard, which is what it is. And I would say, this is probably the most important slide in the talk. Just this idea of emotional generalization to you're applying it to your own values. This isn't something that applies to anyone. Like, not everyone likes these things, but I do, and I can generalize from that to form this abstract standard. And it just follows from the next step is we acknowledge that this new generalized ranking is going to act as a standard for us. And I'm going to show you how that works, which is really interesting. So that's the first big part of the three for this process. Next is applying this generalized ranking. So what we did up until this point was a lot of work, right? A lot of thinking, not just thinking, but you're feeling, right? You're thinking about your feelings, and it's not just thinking. There's more than that. But it's a lot of work. So you can think of that as the saving up step. We're saving up. We're doing work. Now we're about to cash in on it. So we're applying this generalized ranking, and it has 5 parts, which we're going to go into now. Okay, so one thing that happens when you form a standard like this, I've experienced this, is you become more sensitive to your values, your likes, your dislikes. So when I formed this new standard about daily use tools, one thing that stood out to me in my part of it was my cabinet in my bathroom was a freaking mess. I kind of thought about it before, but when I formed this new standard within me, or strengthened this standard within me, it really stood out to me. I was like, man, I really don't like this. So that's the first step is this is an in engineering terms, out of sample case where it wasn't part of my standard originally, but now it is, or it's becoming a part of it. So I realized I didn't like it, so I say, okay, what should I do to address that issue? So the first step here is generating alternatives. So I don't like the messy cabinet, which is a daily tool if you think about it, right? You use a cabinet to hold your toiletries, whatever. So it's applying to that standard, or to that generalized ranking. The first step is figure out, okay, I know I need some kind of organizer to fix this. So the first step, which is fairly straightforward, you generate alternatives, which is, all right, I need to try out various organizers, or whatever it is in your example, alternatives to rank, because you can't rank without alternatives. So the first step is generating alternatives. And I have here what this AI tool is. I'm extremely bullish on AI, generative AI, and it's called Perplexity.ai. Highly recommend it. I think it will drastically improve your life. It's basically AI web search. So it's really good at generating alternatives. So I just told it, I'm looking for an under the bathroom sink organizer, and it gave me a bunch of organizers. And one thing really good about it is you can really specify the context, your personal context. So it can give you very personalized results. All right, so that's the first step. And then once you have alternatives, then you're going to proceed to predict and test those based on that generalized ranking we formed before. So the first way to predict is, for those alternatives, you want to perform a type of mental simulation for each alternative in terms of how you think you're going to experience that alternative. So for my example, I would, based on those results AI gave me, I would say, okay, imagine if I had this cabinet organizer. Would I get satisfaction from it? Do I get, as I imagine, do I get satisfaction from it? So it's a kind of, you're sampling the various alternatives in this case. It's a type of sampling. It's just very convenient, right? Because it's all mental. And then the next step would be something like actively sampling those alternatives. Because, for my example, it's very simple, right? So it's not, there's no risk to me just mentally doing it, but if something that is higher cost, higher risk potentially, you want to actively sample. So let's say a car, for instance, automobile. You don't want to just do it in your head. Like you really want to go test drive those cars. And like romantic partners, you really want to date. You want to date people first before you marry them, right? So yeah.
Test drive.
Yeah. I think that would lead to less regrets if you actually did that. And then a great question to ask yourself in all these, in predicting and testing, is what price am I willing to pay? Because, like with the car example, let's say you like Camrys, and let's say you found one that is just perfect for you, like perfect ergonomics, it's fast, reliable, etc. But if it costs $10 million, you're probably gonna regret buying that car because you paid too high. There's always a price that's too high. It kind of goes with risk with what Dan was talking about yesterday. So that's the testing phase. And here's the interesting part, where that standard we talked about, that we formed before, where this comes in. So for my example, when I was mentally simulating cabinets, organizers, most of them were just shells. There's shells you put under your cabinet, and I was like, that's okay, that helps. It makes it easier to use. Then there was one that had pull-out drawers, pull-out trays on it, and immediately I was like, I want that one. And I didn't have to think about it. The mentally simulating, that takes thinking. But that realization of, I want that wasn't thinking. I desired that, and that desire came from this standard that I formed before. So that's part of the caching in here. That's part of the value of this process. You are more efficient in your decision making, in your ranking. And because you did this work up front, it's starting to pay off now. You're cashing in on it. So I saw that one, I knew I liked it. That was this standard acting in. I was experiencing this standard as a desire, so as a feeling, but I could explain it. And so this leads to the third part, which is you actually select and implement an alternative. So for me, I got that organizer, I implemented it, and yeah, that step is pretty simple. The next step, though, we're still not objective yet completely. When you select an alternative, you need to revisit that ranking that you made there. You need to constantly check in on it and say, am I satisfied with this alternative that I chose, that I ranked the highest? And did it compare to how I predicted Like, do I actually experience it like I predicted I would experience it? And for me, this answer is yes. I constantly, Eric uses this every day, and I say yes. Every time I use it, I am so glad I bought this. No regrets, whatever. And so you're basically asking yourself, am I on the right trajectory here? When you constantly check in like that. And so this obviously applies to more complex things, a relationship you're in. Am I checking in? Is this on the right trajectory? Am I satisfied with this relationship? And then the last part is revisiting your generalized ranking accordingly, based on that. So I have my generalized ranking here, and like I said, I was satisfied, so I don't need to revise this standard. But because I know it did well in my ranking here with this 3, it's now even more strengthened within me. So now I'll use it even more in the future with more conviction. So that's part 2. And of course, the other cashing in on this, the obvious one is, okay, I now have an organized cabinet, so that's obviously a value. I like that. But also, my standards being strengthened within me. That is, I would argue, even the higher payoff here. Okay, third and final part is taking pride. So why is taking pride important here? Because it is the other kind of cashing in on this process. Because taking pride gives you energy to continue doing this process going forward. Because there's never a payoff, you would just stop doing it. So the more payoff you get, the better. And it gives you motivation, it gives you energy. So that's the big reason. And there's 3 main levels that I have here for the types of pride taking. You got the simplest, which is pride in specific achievements. So this example is I got a organized cabinet. That's the specific achievement. But then the more complex one is pride in your improved ranking skills. So it's a higher level. It has more effects long term, and it's higher level and it's more rewarding. It gives more energy, it's more payoff. And then the most complex type of pride taking is pride in your improved self. So not only are your skills getting better, but yourself as a whole is getting healthier, getting better and healthier. So you are getting happier. Is another way of putting it. Okay, so that's all 3 of the parts. So now just kind of quickly tie them all together. I gave a handout to everyone to be able to track along with this whole process. And just to go over it quickly, you first form the generalized ranking, which we did, and that's the saving up part. And it has 3 parts that we went over. And then that feeds into the applying generalized ranking, which is the part of the cashing in. And that has the 5 parts that we mentioned. And then that feeds back into the forming the generalized ranking. Because this is a never-ending process, it strengthens that ranking you form, but it's also going to contribute to more rankings. Because as we said, this was a ranking. I ranked this over a teacup. But it contributed to a more abstract ranking. And it doesn't stop there, right? It's going to keep going. So it is a never-ending process. It's a process that builds up, like we said, builds up in complexity. And then the third part is taking pride, which happens all throughout this. So it's not just at the end, it happens during this, and all throughout. And that's the other type of cashing in. And then, of course, that has the 3 parts that we mentioned. Okay, like I said, today we went over a very simple example, but in terms of the concrete, but everything we talked about, everything in the handout, in the sheet I gave, applies to all of these other more complex, potentially higher paying things to alternatives to rank. And so just think about, we're today, to give an analogy, we want to play the NBA Finals, but to do that, we first got to learn how to dribble. So that's what we're doing. We're building up this skill to prepare, to get ready for the big stuff. And that questions.
what you're describing, given some other people I've talked to, seems to have a lot in common with therapies like CBT. Have you explored that at all, and the relationship between what you're describing and things like CBT, which people use to, work against, psychological pathologies that they have and try to break through them?
So I've done therapy, I've done CBT. I haven't really looked into it, see how it related to this, but I'd be open to seeing what the connection is to this leadership.
Thanks, Dan. Awesome talk. I was just curious how this process ties into your philosophically defined values. If you think deeply about your philosophy, many of those do in this room, and you have established a standard, or what you think is a rational standard for your overall life, how does that tie back in to the process? How are you constantly checking your likes and dislikes and the standards you generate in the kind of the utilitarian functions of like ranking, the objects around your house, things like that? How does that tie back into the broader philosophical realm?
Right, so you're talking about life as the standard. Is that right?
Yeah, ultimately, right? But
Right. So that's a great question. And really, I would say the big emphasis would be this step right here, for reflecting back. You're basically, when you do that, you're checking in with that ultimate standard. You're saying, am I on the right trajectory? Do I feel like, to put it in one way, do I feel like my ego is getting healthier, my consciousness? Or am I feeling conflict? Do I feel like, am I not as satisfied with the selection I chose over what I predicted? So those can be warning signs. That's the way of kind of checking in with your own functioning, saying, am I going towards life, happiness, or am I going the other way? That make sense?
yes.
James.
Can you give us an example of? You gave us some simple examples. Can you give us a more complex or more intense, concrete example of how this has helped you strengthen your ego, strengthen your preferences?
So I gave just a few examples here. When I did this exercise, things were just starting to bombard me. I was starting to see it everywhere. Like my guitar strings. I noticed I got really good ones because I use those. I practice every day. And I'm like, I do not. I want good ones. So it's following that standard. But to go to the next level, start to the people ones. A good example would be service providers. So I started noticing I like certain kinds of, say, doctors, or like certain kinds of accountants, certain kinds of physical therapists, guitar instructors, and I did the same process with that. So we're moving the people, a simple kind of people, but it's higher level, higher payoff, and I applied it going forward. I like, what kind of people do I like in that context, and I now actively look for those kinds of people in that terms of providing services.
Yeah, that's an easy place to be kind of unconscious and just, this doctor's fine, I guess. Yeah, but now, stronger preferences.
Yeah, sample. You should definitely sample doctors.
We have time for one more brief question over here before Daniel needs to wrap up.
Hey, thanks. I have a question about your ranking. I believe it's under 2, applied generalized ranking, and it was the part where you said, what price are you willing to pay for the object, for the choice? Is that more of an opportunity cost? Like, what price I'm willing to pay if I don't choose that thing? Can you expand more on that?
Yeah, so that is definitely part of the opportunity cost, what are your alternatives, right? So it's because if something else is higher rewarding, an alternative than what you chose, in some way that would be sacrifice, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. So there is opportunity costs, and I guess what you're trying to determine in some sense is, if you're using cost, talk about profit. So it's the type of profit we're talking about, because you're getting energy from gaining these values, a certain kind of energy. And if you spend too much, if you pay too high of a price, you end up feeling regret and not getting energy from that. So that's what you're really trying to maximize, is the energy profit that you're trying to get. And so if you get something that gives you less energy overall, then that would be sacrifice. So that's why determining the cost is important. All right, so with that, to conclude, we went over today knowing how to rank, why it's important, what it is, how to do it, and this is important to Ayn Rand's quote here. We're learning to know our favorites more by doing this. We experience our favorites even more intensely. We know why they're our favorites, so we have conviction to achieve them even greater energy. And so with that, I say, take what we've learned here today, go out, rank, experience your favorites, and get happy. Thank you.